Hello and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres, and the Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to us proudly by WB40, a platform and magazine for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond to share their hard-won wisdom and to join an empowered community. You can check us out at WB40.com. Before we begin today's podcast, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which this podcast is recorded. And in my case, that's the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nations here in Melbourne. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you. Today in the podcast, we will be talking to two phenomenal women, Sandy Davies and Susan Jarvis, and they are both a part of this incredibly powerful anthology, which I will say I'm also proud to be a part of. It is called The Power to Rise Above. These are the stories of 30 women from around the world talking about how they have overcome bullying, trauma, or abuse in order to go on and live their lives and make a dent in the world. Sandy Davies is the editor of this phenomenal book, and she's what I like to call the magic maker. She brought all of these women together to make this happen. She is also the founder of HappyPause, which makes HappyPause Menopause balm, and she proudly helps women and supports women through the perimenopause and menopause journey. And I'll be talking to Susan Jarvis, who has also written a very powerful chapter in this book about her experiences of bullying. And Susan has gone on, of course, to found the Spicy Boudoir, which is an amazing online business. And she is also the host of the Maven's Private Diaries podcast. And she proudly helps women through their sexual journey through life, which is amazing. Please welcome to the confessional for one or two confessions, Sandy Davies and Susan Jarvis. Hello, gorgeous Susan Jarvis and Sandy Davies, and welcome to the confessional once again.
Hello. Yay, it's lovely to be back.
This is not your first trip on this roundabout, ladies, so I love that. We've had lots of fun here in the confessional previously, separately, and so it's really beautiful to bring you both here together today.
Thanks, Sandy. It must be a few months since I had my last confession with you.
As I always say, ladies, confessions are optional, but always very, very welcome.
Yeah, well, I hate to think how much I've sinned since our last chat, but never mind.
That's why I love you both. You know that. I brought you girls on today because we're all involved in this amazing project, and I thought it'd be really fun to have a chat about it together. So, first of all, this is the project where for those who are listening to audio and not seeing the video, we're all holding up a book, and it is a beautiful and powerful anthology called The Power to Rise Above. Yes, I'm doing sexy hand movements, like as if I'm on a game show. The Power to Rise Above. And it is an anthology which brings 30 women together from all over the world to tell their stories of overcoming bullying, overcoming trauma, to rise above and go on and have a brilliant life. So first of all, I wanted to say, I'll throw to you first, Sandy Davies, because congratulations, you are the editor of this book. And this is your baby and your brainchild. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how did this book come about and how you managed to get 30 women, Susan and I included, to come together to share their stories?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Power to Rise Above, it really is it's a project of the heart. And at every stage through it, I just kept thinking, this is beyond me. This is more powerful than my initial vision. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And it actually started, I was in a workplace with a horrific female manager bully. And for some reason for me, it's just even worse when the bully is a female. I hold us to a higher standard, and I expect better, and I expect women to elevate one another. And when they don't, I have snakes spring from my head. And she just kept chewing up and spitting out younger women with potential, and it was horrific. And there was one day where I came in to start a shift, and the current Target was absolutely fuming. And she was literally trying to break a broom into the floor to work through her anger. Couldn't talk to her. She was that mad from how she'd been treated. So I went and grabbed a broom and we broke the floor together. And when we came to the end where she could actually sort of see straight, I told her my experience of bullying, which I write about in the book. And she actually put her hands on top of the broom and cocked her head and said, "You? Bullshit. No way." And it was just this aha moment that because I'm radiant and I'm happy and I always will usually have my joy on, there was this assumption that I couldn't have gone through an experience like that. And I thought, how do we get to our 50s and we haven't shared these experiences with younger women? And I just realized that I'd done a bit of a disservice in not sharing those things that I'd overcome. And that's how the initial concept of the Power to Rise Above was born, is we've got to tell our stories so that other people can gain strength from them and know that they're not alone, and hopefully work through it in sometimes a lot quicker than we did.
Hey there! When Sandy's not interviewing kick-ass women, she's hanging out with me at Alex the Seal, a podcast about music and nostalgia. I'm Jo Pybus, and each episode, Sandy and I talk about all the songs that got us hooked up, knocked up, and broken up. Do yourself a favour and search Alex the Seal on your podcast app. Love you, Molly.
Yeah, beautiful. And your story is absolutely beautiful. By the way, I have read your story. I've read many of the stories. I'm still working through, full disclosure, still working through all the stories in this book. And the reason why I think it's taking a little bit of time is because these stories are people's truth. These are experiences that really happen to women, and some of them are so powerful that you kind of need to read them and then walk away and kind of give yourself that little bit of time to digest. But what's really interesting to me in reading, Sandy, your story, and then Susan reading your story, is that I found out things about you ladies, and we've shared a lot. And so I kind of thought, I know these stories, but to sit there and read them in your own words, I went, whoa, hang on a minute. You know, I had an essence of the story, but I didn't know the story. So, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your extraordinary story, because it's a difficult story, I think, to tell, but I think it's also a story that so many women and people can relate to. So how did you get involved with this project as well, Susan the Maven?
Thanks, Sandy. Well, obviously, I just feel incredibly fortunate to be amongst this anthology, and thank you, Sandy Davies, for inviting me. I think, you know, through our friendship, you had an idea of what I'd gone through, and we've talked about your experience of bullying, and I share with you what I went through in my workplace. But my initial start in life, I guess, was bullying from a parent, which is difficult to say out loud because that parent is still alive. I haven't told them that I've written about them. Everything I've written about in the chapter, I have said to them over the years, but they're not open to having that conversation with me or sharing an understanding and empathy that maybe their parenting style at that time, you know, harmed me. And I reflect on in that chapter that I really think that parent didn't know the sort of child I was. They didn't know how to deal with me. I was a very curious, scientific kid. I wanted to look at everything, work out why things worked. And I had a bug catcher and a microscope and a magnifying glass. And there's a little story there about what I did with the scalpel to find out how sharp it was. I'm not going to do any spoilers, but you have to read it. I still cringe when I can see it happening when I the scalpel. And,
my heart was with you in that moment when I read that. By the way, no spoilers. People can read the book, but I remember reading that and thinking, "Oh God!" You know.
And I went into slow motion.
Yeah, me too. Like thinking, actually, just trying to imagine like your parents walking in the door. You know. Oh,
yeah. And they didn't have a great deal of money. They had 5 children to look after. And, so that was a horrible moment. But those experiences as a child, like I went through bedwetting until I was about 12, and a lot of it is hooked up in that. I feel my weight has always been linked to my experience as a child, which I've had that discussion with that parent. They deny that. It's all in my head. It's not them, it's me. And I'm very lucky that I have got witnesses to my childhood experiences who've helped validate that it wasn't just me. I give my parent a lot of empathy. I understand they're the product of their upbringing. They had 13 children in their family, so they didn't get the love and attention that they needed as a child either. So, but there are some things that happened to me which I consider to be a choice to be cruel, not just based on their parenting experience, but a choice of indulging themselves in the power of the parent and being cruel to that child. And when the one person in your life that you look up to, you feel rejected by, it hurts, and it's a lasting hurt. So it's difficult to talk without giving spoilers, but writing that chapter was very painful to uncover those childhood experiences in more depth. And I have had a conversation with that parent, not about, I've written about you, but about my life. And I asked them, I said to them, I've never known if you loved me. And it was a very emotional conversation, and it ended with, well, I do love you, Susan. So, and now I've never heard those words. I've seen them in actions, as in having gifts given to me, like homemade gifts, words in a card, but never actually one-on-one eye contact. Love it. I love you. So, and I've had that now. So that means a lot to me, and that adds another layer of healing over the top. But I just want to swing back to, this is part of the reason I chose to put my story out there publicly, is like Sandy, when that person, when you told them about your bullying and they went, bullshit, I don't believe you, I would hope that people would say the same about me. Because in my workplace, when I went through up bullying, I was a manager, and it was 3 staff that created issues. I experienced a breakdown where I lost the power of speech. I could not leave the house for about 6 weeks. I credit playing the computer game Sims as part of my therapy because it was a safe place. It was fun to play. You could put people in a pool and make them drown. I don't know if you've played Sims before, but it brings out the worst in you. But it was all about balance. For the characters to succeed, they have to have food, water, sunshine, recreation, and love. And it just helped me refocus my energies and find balance in my life. And while I would never wish anyone have that experience, it was a key defining moment of my life. I could have let it bury me, but I chose compassion. I had to go back to that workplace where those people worked. I stood down from that role as a manager and became one of their peers. And the only way I could protect myself from their behaviour was holding compassion for them, because how sad their lives must be if they had to feel the need to be horrible to somebody else to make them feel better about themselves. So I also chose to move forward. I had a great psychologist, a great GP. I journaled. I had good friends. And now I have this spine of steel, which holds me upright. And I don't regret that experience at all. And as I say in the book, I slayed those bitches with compassion.
Oh my God, I love that so much. I love that because I think we were talking about this. Obviously, we've talked a bit about our experiences together, but one of the things I was saying before, and we all know this premise, that hurt people tend to hurt people. And I think when you recognize in your bully or your abuser or whatever it may be, when you recognize that they come from a place of damage, of pain, of hurt that they can't reconcile. I think you're right. That was so powerful about your chapter of talking about compassion. And that really resonated with me so much because I spent like a lot of my life having been, an abused child that I could recognize straight away in other people. I can walk in a room and pick it straight away. It is that like is likened to like business. But I think when you recognize that you don't take it as personally either, that you kind of go, look, you're wanting to slay the world and I'm just in the path, right, of that. It's not necessarily about us. So I think what you did in order to go back to work, to find the courage to look at those bullies with such compassion, Susan, is it's extraordinary. And not a skill that everybody has. Some people don't have those tools. So, I just applauded you in that moment, even reading that. I was like, and because I know you like reading your chapter, like I was actually quite teary in parts of that. And at the end of that, reading about that compassion was just so powerful, I think. I don't know. What was your experience of reading her chapter, Sandy? Because Sandy Davies has had to read everybody's chapters because she edited this book.
Even I'm actually not going to answer that. I'm going to be like a politician and dodge the question because what I've found with Susan's chapter, even more than my response, is how much Susan's chapter has moved so many readers. And one of our co-authors felt like that was the story that resonated in her soul for days and she couldn't let go. And my best friend, Eileen Birchall, that I wrote about in Women Beyond 40, issue 3.
Did indeed.
If anyone wants to go back to a back issue. Her niece, Talia Gugabaga Birchall O'Brien, wrote in our book and wrote a beautiful chapter about her toolkit. And one of the things Eileen found in reading Talia's chapter was she thought she knew the timeline and the path of her niece, but she wasn't as aware of some of the depth of some of her experience. And it improved her relationship as an aunt to this beautiful favorite niece because it drew her into a stronger connection and I guess made her more aware of some of the circumstance and to give more compassion. And the other chapter that she couldn't shake was Susan's. And even weeks later, she'll still say, I just feel like I was there in that shower. Because Susan writes about an experience when she goes in the morning to have a shower when dealing with the bullies. And it just absolutely resonated in her soul in a way that has allowed her to find forgiveness and compassion for workplace bullies that she has dealt with in the past. And for me, that's some of the magic of us sharing those brave and very, very, very vulnerable moments, is that it helps others maybe see themselves in those moments as well and give themselves a bit of grace. And all the way through what you were talking about, Susan, I just thought, our whole premise was to write this book for others, to give others hope and give others a sense of resilience and knowing that their inner flame hasn't extinguished. But another thing it's also done, it has given us, as Laura Pena writes, it's given us sanation, which is sanction. And here we are in the confessional talking about it. And our stories have given us sanction. And Tara Coyote writes about Ho'oponopono. So that's the Hawaiian practice of forgiveness. And quite often with our transgressors, they don't have to be present or they don't have to accept our story for us to forgive them and forgive their part in it. And I just love that, like, even in writing your chapter, it's given you Ho'oponopono and allowed you to release a lot of that pain and just shed it away.
Mm. Just thinking about the structure of my chapter, I can probably place each line against sections of the writing. It's funny, I was listening to I was looking for, I can't say the word. I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. Is that?
Oh, yeah, the Ho'oponopono. Yeah.
I needed to build some theta waves to go to sleep with last night, and I listened to that for about a minute before I closed my eyes, and it is very healing. And I would recommend anybody to practice it as well. It's very calming. But sorry,
Susan, I was just going to say, you go.
Well, before our confessional chat this morning, the three of us, Andy had organised a catch-up with authors, and your school friend, Sandy, who I'm not sure what their name they've written under in their chapter.
Lucy,
yeah.
wrote about the reason they came forward with their story was to help any other child going through something similar. And I think that's exactly why I chose to, that if anyone had gone through trauma with a parent or in the workplace, just to show that you can change. You don't have to let it define you. You don't have to live under that dark cloud for the rest of your life. You know, that you can smile, and you can put it behind you. You'll never forget it because it's part of you, okay? But how you take that experience forward, there is potential there to make it into a positive impact on your life. And it's just all about choice, which is something I talk about as well in that chapter.
Yeah. And, and I'm talking about that chapter by Lucy Cooper also got me thinking about like Elizabeth Grace's chapter, Annette Bincham's chapter, Danita's, so many of the chapters that it's not just, I guess, a resource for us to let others know they aren't alone. It's also an incredible resource for any parent whose teen is struggling. And we feel so helpless as parents when our teens are going through a difficult patch. And so many of these stories, I just think, are destined for parents' hands as well.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful point, Sandy, and I think it's so true. It is like such a powerful medium, the medium of storytelling. I think, this is why, obviously, WB40, the Good Girl Confessional, this entire platform is built on the stories of women, right? And to allow women to share their stories, because in sharing our stories, it's so powerful when others hear and they go, oh my God, I thought I was the only one, or I'm not alone, or I'm miserable right now, but I didn't know there was all these amazing women out there, right, who are sharing their vulnerability, who are sharing their wisdom. And this book really brings so much vulnerability, but it's powerful to share vulnerability, right? We all have heard, of course, I'm sure most people have listened to Brené Brown, and she talks about vulnerability and why it's so powerful. I think what you created in this book, Sandy, is exactly that we've all been vulnerable in our own way to bring our stories. I think with me, what's really fascinating too is I talked about, in my chapter, I talked about the abuse, but it's funny that a good friend of mine has read the book, and she actually said, you've written this from a real place of you're healed. This was not, like and I was like, was it? Like, it's kind of a really weird thing to hear someone else's view of that. And I went back and read it and I thought, oh my God, yeah, wow. But I talked a lot about the imagery I have used throughout my entire life, which comes from, a very dark place in my childhood where there was sexual abuse and whatnot. And the imagery that I realized many years later that kept weaving itself through my writing, through high school, through university, through years later, talking about red gum boots and talking about, ancient ghost gums and talking about, tawny frog mouths when I hear them, it's quite fascinating, isn't it, that there are moments in our life that can trigger memories. For me, when I hear those things or see those things, and I've been back to that town that I talk about, by the way, as an adult, I've gone back there and I went with my current partner, Michael, to this little town called El Dorado. It's quite fascinating when I got there how eerie that was to go, wow. But I do think it was really cathartic to be in that space and actually go, wow, you've come a long way, girl. I think, do you find like for both of you, there are certain things, whether it be words, smells, senses, whatever it may be, that actually take you back to those places?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think too, like part of that thing of developing an arsenal or a toolkit of hope is whenever you have any of those things that take you back, maybe in a hurtful or painful way, you always have to have the other side as well, I guess, because for me, I still have certain perfume scents that were part of my resilience. So, I would spray on Anise and know that I was going to have a kick-ass day. Or there was one particular color of sticky notes that I used to always write little messages on, so I use those then when I need an extra boost. So we have things that can take us back in a bad way, but then we also have those counter things that are our symbols of strength, just like you have your symbols of strength. And those are the ones that then remind us that, we are amazing and we are capable and we do have an inner flame that can't extinguish.
So true. And so for me, my symbols are, things like the red gum boots, later in my life translated to bright red lipstick, right? So when I'm having one of those days, that's what I do. I don the red lips and, yeah, absolutely. And I'm loving that Susan today has got her red lips on. I love that.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? I do think we have those, we have our tools, don't we? Oh, Susan, I can't hear you.
Sorry, my dogs have been moving around, so I muted my microphone. My strategy for dealing with the parent was avoidance, and we are so fortunate to have my primary schooling in the 70s, my teenage years in the 80s, woohoo, and my young adult years in the 90s, and we had freedom. I was on my push bike with the other kids in the neighbourhood and my siblings from basically, from breakfast until dinner every night. So these are the smells for me of my childhood which make me feel good. The smell of matches and cap guns. Because I was a fire child, I used to play with fire.
She still likes it hot, Sandy, let's face it.
I started smoking when I was 13 to be cool, and I quit well over 20 years ago, thank God. But I remember I used to go down the creek and have a cigarette down there, and one day I lit a clump of grass, thinking, how cool. But the fire went down and then started to spread outwards. And I was just so lucky that I was near a creek and there was a dead branch, so I was able to put the branch in the water and bash it out. But it got a good metre square, so very, very lucky. So, yeah, matches and cap guns because I was a cowgirl when I was a kid. My other favourite smell is mangrove mud.
Oh, yeah.
Every year we would go to holiday at a beach near Hervey Bay, and we would rent a house right on the water. Literally, the water edge was 10 metres from the front steps. Okay, beautiful place, and we would be there for 2 weeks every year. And being the second oldest of 5 kids, we just had a ball. We just covered ourselves in mangrove mud all day and fished, roamed, the sand flats, pumping yabbies and all of that sort of stuff. So my childhood memories have been the happiest when we've, been on holiday and done activities, or I've been playing with my friends, and I have really held on to them. As a mature woman now in her mid-50s, I can reflect on my childhood and have keep a perception or perspective. Sorry, perspective is the word I'm looking for. That yes, there was trauma there, but I'm so grateful I didn't experience violence other than being like, I can't look at a wooden spoon or a wooden coat hanger the same, because I did get pelted with that a lot. But there was no domestic abuse happening in my family. There was no sexual abuse happening in my family. We were a very rowdy family, but I now know I was lucky to grow up in that environment as well, because I've gained a lot of strengths. And while that one-on-one relationship with my parent, it was not the nurturing, loving, warm relationship that I needed as a child, I have still blossomed and grown. And I went and saw a psychic years ago, and I know I've got off a little bit track here, but they picked up that I'd had issues with my parent, and they basically said, you just need to let it go, because who would you, that person's been put in your life for you to overcome and rise above, what they dealt to you. And I have. I really have, and I'm so fucking proud of the way I've become.
Absolutely.
I have gone the completely opposite way. I have had as a mother and a parent, because I see them as two different things. I raised my child the way that I needed to be raised, which was with love, compassion, unconditional regard. They also went through bedwetting until they were about 8. They didn't have the same experience that I had. They had a positive, nurturing, understanding approach. And I'm so proud of the adult that they've become. And actually, my parent has acknowledged that in a way. Indirectly, they would never say to me, "Oh, Susan, you've done a great job as a mum." But I know that they've said it to me indirectly. And I appreciate that acknowledgement, at least. So
I think it's quite extraordinary as human beings as well. Before, when you said that you hadn't heard your mother say "I love you," and how powerful that was when you heard the words and she looked at you. My mum, and I got quite close towards the end of her life, and ours was always a bit of a problematic relationship. She was a fierce little fiery, proud disabled woman and a feminist, but my God, she was tough as nails on some point. She just really was. And so we didn't get, by her own admission, she was not maternal. And I think had she been born in a different time, I don't think she would have been anybody's parent. Again, goes on to have 5 children, really didn't overwhelmed by the entire process and wasn't thrilled by it, and couldn't kind of deal with the realities of, let alone deal with any trauma that was going on in the children's lives. So it was like, but I also know she did the best she could with the tools that she had at her disposal. And if I thought my childhood was sometimes crap, hers was even worse. So I think it is such an interesting kind of dynamic, isn't it? But when she was dying, she said to me, "Is there anything else you need? Is there anything else you need from me, darling?" And I said, well, the one thing I guess I need to ask is, I've always wondered, are you proud of me? And the look of horror on her face. And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you've never told me. I don't actually know." And realizing in that moment that I obviously always wanted to hear it, because I, said the words out loud. And she said, "Of course I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you." But it was such a powerful moment in my life to go, look, I'm getting emotional, because it's true, because you kind of go, like, why would it, like, I've spent my entire life not really worrying about other people's, approval of me or whatever, but I needed that. And to have it, and for her to genuinely mean it, just meant everything. And that's something my children have never had to ask for, or will never have to ask for, because we're a different generation, right? And so it's easy for us to say to our children, "I love you. I'm proud of you. I want the best for you. I'm going to support you no matter what. There's nothing you could do that would ever, I'd never turn you away." we're very blessed, I think, in a way, to be in a very different generation as well.
You're right. And sorry, I just want to add, Sandy, your my child has no need to ever ask me that question about, are you proud of me? Do you love me? Because they have grown up their whole life knowing that they have that from me, and I didn't have that as a child. And you don't realise just how much that weaves into your body, into your heart and your being. And I can't say exactly when I did this, but I cut that need from my mum to know. Like, I recently asked her, do you love me? I just don't know if you've ever loved me. And she told me yes. But I don't need to know, is she proud of me? Her approval is not required anymore. It was 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but now her approval means nothing to me anymore.
Which is powerful in and of itself, right?
It is. If you can let that go, whoever that person or people are that hold that you give that power to, just cut it and let it go.
And for some people, it's such a work in progress too. I know for me, I mean, my chapter is all about, I was, as I said, a child of sexual and physical abuse from a father figure. It was, it took me a lot of years to sort of get through that. And what I realized, I am a person who kind of likes to deal with things head on, and I get that not everybody's like that. And so for me, when I had my first child, a lot of things got raised. It was like the floodgates opened, and all the things that I had suppressed suddenly came to the surface. Of course, because in that moment I was definitely in this, I need to protect this child at all costs. So for me, I think, I did go and seek help. And I remember going to this women's clinic and saying, I don't know if you've got anyone here I can talk to, but this happened to me. And I remember it being just such a powerful moment in my life. And I was terrified I was going to walk in and they would say, no, we can't help you here. Off you go. But they didn't do that. They actually said, yes, actually, wait here. And I had someone come out, an intake person who just literally talked to me for half an hour without an appointment, and then said, all right, we're going to make an appointment. Through that process of dealing with that, and I was quite young, still I was, 21, 22. And I remember her saying to me, do you realize when you talk about yourself as a child, you refer to her as she and her? And I said, what? She said, you never say I, like you've disconnected yourself, you've disassociated yourself from that child. I think that was such a powerful watershed moment in my life, to reconnect with that child, that inner child, because if you can't do that, how do you love yourself? How do you, right? I needed to hug that child symbolically. I needed to hold her and say, it's not your fault, everything's okay. I needed to, drop because if you don't drop the shame, how do you heal? And a lot of people from bullying and harassment and whether it's workplace or schoolyard bullies or abusers or parental bullying, we carry this like a cloak. We wear it like a blanket of shame. Like somehow it's our children, right?
Yeah. And, that thing about reconnecting with our inner child in that moment, one of our co-authors, Faith Agugu, has done probably one of the best inner child meditations I have ever come across in my entire life. I think if you just search Faith Agugu in meditation, it will probably come up, but I might even send you the link for the notes of the podcast.
Yeah, please.
It is such a short meditation, but oh my gosh, it is the best meditation I've ever had for that reconnecting with your inner child. And I just love, with all of our stories, there are so many of us as authors who have broken that cycle and are changing things for the next generation. And I love, like for me, with my dad was the person who came back from the war, determined, he and his brothers, that they were breaking the cycle that they had. And every single one of those siblings broke the cycle. And I love when you see then generations later that effect of having that courage of breaking the cycle. And when Susan was talking about it earlier, I was thinking, I wish I could just remember straight off my head, word by word. But when Terai Trent wrote the foreword for the book, she actually writes about that intergenerational healing. And she writes, amongst these sacred stories, you will, and I wish Terai's voice, I'd rather have her here reading it. Amongst these sacred stories, you will not only find hope for all our future generations to come, but also powerful stories of intergenerational healing and release. And then she goes on to talk about, if you're yearning to discover your greatness in this life, this book is for you. If you are going through some rough patches in your life, then this powerful anthology is proof that each of us as women have the power to rise above. And that's just like you said, Susan, that power to rise. Like, it doesn't matter how deep our darkness is, how much those hurts of the past are there. There's little bits of joy and light that will always come through the cracks.
Just on that, can I, Sandy, read out the quote that I discovered during my writing? This actually
please.
Yes, my story as well. So, so the title of my chapter, and thank you, Sandy, for suggesting this. I think it was different to what I actually came up with. It's called Bitches of Eastwick.
God, I love the name of this so much. I loved it. I loved it. The BOE.
And I tell you, this is actually what I did call them at that time. They were the Bitches of Eastwick. There's 3 women. There's Cat's Bum Mouth, Bitch Face Jan, and the Smiling Assassin.
And so I just need to say, Susan's chapter is just the start for Susan. Like, when you see a book with her name as the full author, the solo book, you have to buy it in the future. It is going to...
Yeah, I am working on that too. So, yeah, Bitches of Eastwick, stand tall and release generational trauma. Let's get to the very end. So, Dr. Bruce Perry wrote the book, What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience and Healing with Oprah Winfrey. And in it he wrote, it is the rare and strong person that can carry their trauma without having it spill into the next generation. So reading those words immersed my heart in love and pride for what I have achieved, because I know that I have achieved just that. I broke the chain of emotional abuse that I received and only gave my child positive emotional support their whole life. Dr. Perry's quote reinforces to me that I am great. I am resilient. I am love and compassion personified. And for that, I feel calm and at ease. I can leave the past where it is and focus on my future self. So my advice to you regarding your trauma would be to let it guide you to your power. Choose to seek help and commit yourself to develop your heart, mind and soul. Your trauma is a pathway to your higher self. And while that path is a tough one, you can conquer it. The only way forward is through. And importantly, love yourself first so that others can love you too.
Hell yeah.
Boom.
Yes.
Mic drop. It is. Thank you for reading that out in your own words, like in your voice, because it is so powerful, your chapter, and it's just beautiful. I think, one of the things that I wrote, and Sandy encouraged me to put this line in as well when I said it to her, but that monsters can't thrive in the darkness, and so the more we have to keep shining, we have to keep shining the light into the darkest corners of our minds and our lives in order to slay the monsters, right? Because they can't survive there, and I think it is the power of telling our stories out loud and setting them free into the universe, and our wisdom and what we've learnt. Because, like you, Susan, and like you, Sandy, I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't go through that. I just wouldn't be.
Exactly.
Right? And mine's been like an ongoing journey. I think everybody's is, of things. And you never know what's going to, come up until it comes up, right? But I think one of the things I've learned over the years, and maybe I feel very blessed and lucky that I have always done it, as I said, is to face things head on and kind of go, wow, well, that's new. I don't know where that came from, but all right, let's deal with it. I think in that way, I think it was the only way I could break cycles as well, because my mum could not deal with her own trauma and couldn't deal with her own grief at a life that didn't turn out the way that she wanted it to, right? So I think, we have the power to create our life in the present moment every day, like every day. And and I think, shit will always happen. Life is messy and not perfect. This is truth. But it's how we deal with it. So Sandy, I wanted to ask quickly about this beautiful artwork, because this is sensational. For those, I will put up a picture when we, put this out. So if people aren't actually watching the video and they're listening to the audio, they'll be able to see the book. It's stunning. But please tell us about the extraordinary artwork on the cover of the book and what it means and symbolizes.
Yes, so the artwork is just so amazing for our book. And it is, I'm up on Eastern Guyalanji country, and the artwork has been done by Eastern Guyalanji artist Cheryl J. Burchell. And it's the story of Gidja the Moon. And it is about very powerful women's symbol. And everyone is always drawn to the dragonfly, to the Wara Wara. But for me, the dragonfly is such a symbol of hope and, finding that strength in our wings. But there's also so much more to this than just the dragonfly, because we also have the moon that always rises. And it's just that same, as I've said, those moments of darkness, joy always creeps back in. You will always have that moment of that full, bright moon that will renew your soul. So even when your wings feel a little bit tired, the moon will always rise. And I just love that we have that amazing art from Cheryl Burchell. It's just beautiful.
It is absolutely stunning, and I'm very lucky that I actually own a little piece of her gorgeous artwork, thanks to Sandy. She's quite an extraordinary artist, so I think it's so beautiful. There are so many powerful stories, by the way, in this anthology. A lot of beautiful, incredibly strong and diverse women in this book. From Becky Perez and Lisa Cox and, Chelsea Cruz, and there's just Jasmine, everybody. There's so many. How did you go about, Sandy, actually bringing everyone, I guess, how did you convince everyone, or did you just put it out there and, build it and they will come?
It started with a few key people. And initially, the book was entirely going to be people who had experienced the same bully. And then it grew into so many more of us. And it's one of those things, it took on a magic beyond, because I knew that I had to have Deslyn Hawkeyes share her story. And then I couldn't share Deslyn's story without having her best friend Karen Gibson's story. And Karen Gibson writes about the failed gift of her suicide. And it just leaves the back of your neck, all the hairs on your arms, everything. Her story is so powerful for anyone that is in that moment to give space and let yourself breathe. And then, from Karen grew to include Sarah in New York, who has this amazing children's book, Treasures Around Us. And her contribution is a chapter that's actually a poem. And so I love that we have multiple art forms. We have a Dutch graphic artist. It grew and grew and grew in so many natural ways. And you, Sandy, you were the one that said, I know that it's your project. However, if you haven't met Beck, she has a killer story. It's that being open to everyone else's magic as well. Like, you led me to Beck, and we all know if we've read Beck's story that the book would be less without it. And it's the same with all 30 of us. I feel like every little bit of the weave was just a bit of divine perfection to bring us all together and bring this diversity of stories together, so that no matter who we are, we're going to see a little bit of ourselves on at least one page, if not many, many, many pages.
Yeah, I agree. And just there's a power in the collective as well, I think, of seeing so many different stories. And the one thing, of course, that unifies all of these beautiful stories is that every one of these women has gone on to do really great things, has overcome that in their life to actually go on and do some really kick-ass things. And, so while I'm on that, I mean, I've got two extraordinary women here sitting in the confessional. Sandy, the fact that you brought this book together is fucking kick-ass, let me just say. You are a powerhouse, but you're also the founder of your own business, which is called HappyPause, and where you create a HappyPause balm, which is for vaginal dryness, and it's really, really important for women going through perimenopause, menopause, chemotherapy. So I want to quickly talk a little bit about both your businesses. Susan, I'll come to you in one tick. So the gorgeous Sandy Davies, HappyPause, tell us all about it. And I love the other day I saw Susan do a shout out to you who called you the Vag Queen of Australia. So
yeah, I'll never forget actually being on the Maven's private diaries with Susan and her calling HappyPause a miracle balm. And I say with our book, Paradise Above, I just feel like a puppy at the feet of Dr. Tara Trent, Oprah's favorite guest of all time, who wrote our foreword.
No,
well, I know. But in the space of women's health, I am like a puppy at Susan's feet because she called my balm a miracle balm. And I just, it gave me my groove back during menopause. It made everything else manageable, which is why I had to take it to the globe. And I love my little natural moisturizing balm for our vulva and vagina, because 70% of women will struggle with dryness after the age of 40, and we don't talk about it. And so many of the treatments are so outdated and uncomfortable. So having something that is just a small application that just makes you feel like you can take on the whole day or last all night, it's so, so crucial. And I guess part of my role now as the Vag Queen of Australia is I want us all to moisturize our bits because we live so much longer. We need to feel good. Like 40 is just the start.
Oh my God. And I just I put it out there, and I just say this all the time. This is not product placement, but I bloody swear by this stuff. I love it. I use it. I would say to everybody, get out amongst it if you've got any dryness. It really is fantastic. And now, and I did tell Sandy this because it's based, like, it's natural and it's based in like coconut. Every time I smell coconut now, I think about sex. So there you go.
Oh, we have, I have I've got an amazing,
I love it. And of course, Susan Jarvis, also known as Susan the Maven, is you are, of course, the founder and director of the Spicy Boudoir. And you were also the host of the extraordinary the Maven's Private Diaries podcast, where you talk about sex. And congratulations, because you've just written for Mamma Mia about masturbation, I believe.
Yes, I have. Thank you very much, Sandy. And I just want to say, ladies and people who are listening, just on HappyPause, we moisturise our face. Why wouldn't we moisturise our vulva? I mean, I wish I had known about HappyPause years ago when I was going through perimenopause, because I have had sandpaper between my legs. Very uncomfortable. So, if that's your experience, you don't have to live like that. Get yourself some HappyPause. You can buy directly from HappyPause, or you can get it through the Spicy Boudoir. So, masturbation. Can I just talk about that at the moment?
Yes, you can.
Favorite word. That and money. Okay. There's nothing wrong with masturbation. I know that we grow up being taught not to touch ourselves, that women's pleasure doesn't have any priority. I'm getting sick and tired of watching movies at the moment where women are just there to be used. The sexual experience is all male-focused and all that. So the best thing that women can do for themselves is experience self-pleasure on a regular basis. It's not shameful. It's not sinful. It will help you learn the language of your body and your orgasm, which there's 50 shades of different orgasms basically as well. So ladies, if you need help in embracing your sexuality, please reach out to me. I do offer consultation and happy to have that first half hour for free so you can get to know, if I'm the right fit for you. And I can be your private sexual confidant.
Love it.
But,
and I will put up all the links as well in the show notes. So, I just think to jump onto the Spicy Boudoir as well. I'll put up the links to both of your websites as well, because, Susan sells like sex toys and sex aids, and it's bloody fabulous. And, but if you're not sure what the right sex toys are for you, or what the right, whatever, jump into, talk to both these ladies, because they can tell you all the things. All of it.
I just want to check. You don't have anything strapped on the inside of your thigh at the moment, Sandy?
No, I don't.
Then?
No, I don't. But not there's anything wrong with that.
And hey, so Sandy, Susan, I just have to let you in on a little secret. One of our co-authors is a big fan of HappyPause, and her husband's new catch cry for foreplay is, "Sweetie, can we use a little bit of that cocoa vag?"
Cocoa vag! I love it.
So that's his name for HappyPause now.
Oh my God, I love it. Cocoa vag. And this is really beautiful proof, and why I wanted to end it like this, our little podcast today, because proof that you can go through a ton of crap in your life and end up being vibrant, passionate, amazing women who have a voice, who can share their voice with the world and their hard-won wisdom with the world, who've gone on to create amazing businesses to help other women and get other women to connect. And I think this is what it's all about. Sandy Davies, I call you the magic maker, because you are. Look at this extraordinary book. It is out now. We will put up links for this as well, where you can buy the book. And please do get amongst it. It's a beautiful book. It's so beautifully edited and curated. The stories are powerful and brilliant. And I can't thank you ladies enough for coming on today and sharing all about your experiences, where you started and where you are now.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't anyone listening, remember that you have the power to rise just like us.
You do. And honestly, this book is living proof that you're never, ever alone in your experiences, even when it feels like it. And while no two experiences are ever alike, if you read this book, you will know that you are amongst a collective of kick-ass women who have also experienced some stuff in their life and have managed to rise. So thank you both so much. You're bloody brilliant. I'm going to put up all the links for Susan and for Sandy Davies and for the book, The Power to Rise Above. It is available now. It's quite an extraordinary book. And thank you so much. I personally am so grateful to be a tiny part of this, Sandy Davies. Thanks so much for inviting me to share my story as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Sandy. And Sandy Davies, love you so much.
Right back at both of you.
Look at all the love. It's a mutual love society going on here. All right. Thanks, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.